Hello everyone. Today we'll talk about dry fasts and acidosis. We often confuse it with diabetic ketoacidosis. So we are going to explain the differences a little and talk a bit about acidosis and dry fasts. We touched upon this in the training. This video is entirely general in nature. So naturally, those who want to go further, you have my two books that have been published, the latest being The Dry Fasting Revolution. It's a reference book on dry fasting based on practice and support, on support experience, on personal dry fasts and naturopathy consultations across 20 support cycles. So this synthesizes all of that, and you also have a book that lets you grasp dry fasting a bit, practice it, and take some initial steps. However, this does not permit slow dry fasting protocols. I have created a training program called the Dry Fasting Masterclass. You will find about 15 hours of dry fasting training. So there you have something quite exhaustive on preparation, on how, what to do during the fast, etc., how to resume, all the details, the foods, etc. So in the videos, we won't go into all those details which are too long. The videos here are informative based on the questions I get. So we will elaborate a bit on these acidosis questions, which sometimes confuse people, and that is all. So there is genuinely a frequent misunderstanding surrounding dry fasting, the fear of acidosis. Acid, it comes from another source. They hear acid, ketone crisis, that causes some fear. So right away people think of the medical emergency, type 1 diabetic ketoacidosis. So it is a confusion. So we are going to set the record straight with this information. So acidity does not mean a pathology. It's not a pathology to have an acidic body. So life is acidic. We have more acidic periods than others. If we are stressed or if we eat more acidic, it will slightly acidify the body. However, the blood is never acidic. It is primarily the tissues that will be affected by the acidity. So physical effort produces lactic acid. Digestion changes the pH based on what you eat. So immunity voluntarily creates acidic environments. It's intentional. Respiration also modifies the pH on a constant basis. So acid is a biological tool that we utilize. It's not a poison. What causes the pathology isn't so much the acidity, but the inability to regulate it. The inability to regulate these acids is what truly poses the problem. So the blood pH remains extremely stable, hovering between 7.35 and 7.45. So even a minimal variation in blood pH is undesirable and rarely occurs. However, the pH of the tissues, however, varies constantly. That's why I am against taking measurements using urine. None of that is reliable enough. It is not a trustworthy marker. Other markers are more relevant than that. But that is not a marker that reflects the totality of the acidity of the body and the tissues, so that's 25%. So it is not something we use. I know that older naturopaths use it, but it is completely outdated now. So the tissues can temporarily become more acidic. For what purpose? To clean, to dissolve, to repair, to disorganize pathological structures. Dry fasting acts mainly on tissue pH, not on blood pH. We must be very clear. So two radically different acidosis, which are only diabetic ketoacidosis in type 1 diabetics. So we are going to explain. So that is a serious medical emergency. So it occurs in type 1 diabetics when there is no insulin at all. So glucose stays trapped in the blood, cells starve, acetogenesis becomes uncontrollable, ketones brutally raise the blood pH. The blood pH drops dangerously, so the body doesn't choose this situation, it suffers it. So for type 2 diabetes, this is rather indicated for ketogenic diets and dry fasting specifically. We will rather provide interesting assistance to a type 2 diabetic individual. So type 2 diabetes, the insulin is there, insulin exists, ketosis is regulated. The fasting or ketogenic diets can really improve or even reverse it. I said it, it works very, very well. So should sugar be administered during ketoacidosis? This is a frequent question. No, sugar should not be given. In diabetic ketoacidosis, the problem is not so much the lack of sugar, it is the problem of absence of insulin. You must be able to get the insulin in, so giving sugar will not solve the problem. It will increase the glycemia, it will worsen the situation. So there you go. The treatment that medicine uses is insulin, it is to rehydrate, it is to perhaps give electrolytes, that's it. So the faster's acidosis is something else entirely, water or whatever else. Here we are discussing a voluntary physiological adaptation. It occurs when insulin is low but functional. The body therefore chooses fats. Ketosis increases progressively. The buffering systems work well. There is no problem. Kidneys, lungs, and liver work together. The body directs this acidity. It controls it very, very well. And then the buffering systems will come into play. So the body has automatic brakes, which are the lungs eliminating carbon dioxide. It adjusts the pH in a few minutes. And then we have the kidneys eliminating fixed acids. Subsequently, it reabsorbs the bicarbonates, a process that takes several hours, sometimes even several days to complete. So the minerals that come into play, calcium, magnesium, potassium, they neutralize the excess acid in the tissues. That's why it's important to have sufficient minerals. I am a fan of quinton plasma, things like that. Of fir resin, we give that. We give some pianto, things like that. That's interesting too. The Thorpon systems are utilized to manage and control this level of acidity within the body to buffer. Connective tissues act as a temporary zone. If these systems work, there's no issue. All is well. During the process of fasting, the fast itself will initiate a state of moderate acidosis, controlled, transitory. Frequently, the initial acidosis crisis manifests approximately between the 36th hour mark and 2 to 3 days of dry fast. In water fasting, it takes longer, it goes slower, so it is more delayed. It corresponds to the fuel switch when moving from sugar, depleted glycogen to ketones. We experience this metabolic switch, and then the first acidosis crisis occurs. The transition to fat burning, production of BHB, of beta-hydroxybutyrate. Afterwards, we have a rise in tissue acidosis, so possible symptoms, strong breath, loaded uncle, fatigue, pains that can occur even during the first water acid crisis. It's possible. A strange feeling, that's the first water acid crisis. Other things can happen in people afterward, it's possible. It is not an intoxication, it is what we call a metabolic shift. Metabolic, the curative effects from the first crisis. Sometimes we can have an improvement in something, particularly if the body's state was previously hindered by alkalosis. There's a metabolic block, an inflammation. A swift improvement can be noted for certain chronic pains, digestive issues, or inflammation within just 3 days of dry fasting. It can already have a result. This is contingent upon the individual's underlying constitution, their personal history, and the efficiency of their acid regulation systems. Some are stronger than others. It depends on the capacity of the kidneys' work, the lungs, etc. Why acidosis? It is therapeutic. Moderate acidity allows the dissolution of pathological deposits. Autophagy is activated in a major way. This results in the cessation of bacteria and fungi. When you stop consuming water, metabolic water is generated. There is never a deep dehydration. However, we are going to dry out pathogens. That's why dry fasting is very effective on infections like helminthic diseases, parasites, bacteria, viruses. It is very effective for all types of infection. Dry fasting is very interesting because it has a double effectiveness. It will help the ureter system to reset itself. It will eliminate pathogens. By drying them out, we pulverize them. The other mechanism, which is very little known, is biofilms. In certain pathologies, biofilms will conquer the bacteria which are very resistant. The acidosis crisis will rather have an interesting action on these biofilms and destroy them. The acidosis state will make them fragile. This unique therapeutic aspect of dry fasting is what sets it apart. You will not find this in any other method. Second acidosis crisis, it is often the most curative crisis. It occurs between the 6th and the 9th day. It depends on several factors. For example, in my case, I do not necessarily have a crisis in the second phase. I do not really feel it. There are people where we feel it very well. We see it very well. It is very clear. It appears in certain types of people. It can occur in anyone. We have observed that individuals who remain calmer throughout the fasting period, who may have done some work on emotional release, might experience the crisis sooner or show up. If you are in resistance, you are fighting against it. You cannot make things circulate. The crisis is a bit more complicated. It will be later or not at all, we don't know. Even without a crisis, dry fast has interesting effects. Regardless of whether you experience resistance or not, a beneficial curative manifestation will ultimately occur. But if we are more detached, more relaxed, it is still more interesting. Metabolic water becomes the dominant source. During this particular phase, spanning the 6th, 7th, and 8th days, the metabolic water massively hydrates, trying to bring in a maximum of things. Lipolysis is very fast, lots of fat burning in this somewhat final phase. Autophagy is maximal, a maximum of autophagy starting from the 5th day. It goes very deep. We truly change our system. It's not magic, it's a terrain change. We return to our emotional calm. The more relaxed and stable we are, the more the crisis can be triggered. Stress blocks all supplies generally, including acids. We tense tissues, preventing regulation, homeostasis. Hence the importance of doing emotional work, doing yoga, things that release, that relax. We empty our heads, we rise in consciousness, rise in vibration. We aim to induce a change that is not just metabolic, but also physiological and related to consciousness. To be able to move towards new things, to really do a powerful emotional cleansing. And then regarding the acids, we have an acidosis that gets stronger and stronger as the days go by. That's why we can have a real curative and lasting effect in the second dry fast crisis. Afterwards, it varies. In one fast, we improve the person, but sometimes consolidation is needed later. Then the distance between the two treatments is something to discuss with the person, to see how they have recovered, etc. That is a discussion we have during the second treatment. When the person returns, we will be able to evaluate some metrics with them. A consultation can also reveal how they recovered and how long it took to regain their energy levels. If recovery is quick, we can do a fast treatment. If the person needed, imagine 2 months to bounce back, we won't start a new treatment after 2 months. That's clear. It's just logical. The emotional work during the dry fast helps to regulate the acids. Breathing helps a lot. We do breathing exercises during the treatments. We do yoga. We have the Schumann plate. We have equipment that help with relaxation. There are massages. There are gentle movements. There are different workshops that really help with releasing the central nervous system. Subsequently, the body will be more effective at eliminating waste, including any surplus acids. After the fast, of course, we replenish proteins. We rebuild. It is important to have a gradual intake of proteins. We rebuild tissues. We remineralize. We recharge the buffer systems. So the fast cleanses, the proteins rebuild. It proceeds in the correct sequence. Stem cells will also repair, growth hormones too. All this helps repair. So in conclusion, the acidosis from dry fasting is not a pathology. It is an adaptive phenomenon, transitory, intelligent. So the idea is, don't hesitate to say that we are not confusing diabetic ketoacidosis with the tissue acidosis of dry fasting. They are two completely different things. And there can also be fevers that appear that can signal an acidosis crisis when there is hyperthermia. Hyperthermia is useful. It destroys pathogens. It matures immunity. So we are thankful for a fever when it comes. We won't stop it with antipyretics, etc. That's it. So that is all for today. A short video on acidosis. See you soon. Bye-bye.